Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Books Closed. I am your host, Andrew Stortz. Yesterday, the doors of Tattoo City opened and closed for the last time. Ed Hardy's legendary tattoo shop in San Francisco has been a pillar of modern tattooing since 1992. Time marches on, and now that Ed is fully retired from all things tattoo, change is inevitable. Ed's publishing company, Hardy Marks, has made some of the most important tattoo books during his decades-long career. He wanted to document and share the origins and history of tattooing, along with showing what the craft had become as he and other influential artists pushed the boundaries of what was even thought to be possible. The story of Tattoo City may have come to a close yesterday, but luckily, Ed has passed the reins of Hardy Marks to Taki and Molly Kitamura from State of Grace Tattoo in San Jose, California. With many years of experience in making some of the most important tattoo books of their own happen, I can't think of a better pair to take over Hardy Marks. One of their first big projects is the reintroduction of the iconic Tattoo Time series, and Taki wanted to introduce me to their new editor, Ethan Dodge. All right, so what are we talking about here?
Well, it's funny because, first off, thanks for having us on here. We really appreciate it. I don't know if I've even done a podcast since the last time I did one with you. I always tend to think I sound ridiculous afterwards, and I regret it, which is no fault of yours.
That's very normal.
But, I think this actually warrants something that we want to talk about, and that's Hardy Marks Publications. So I think... obviously, it's a huge deal for us, but I do think it's of a lot of relevance to the tattoo industry, or the tattoo world, really. I don't think I would even be a tattooer, possibly not even be tattooed, if it wasn't for Ed Hardy and Hardy Marks Publications. And I think that statement is probably true of a lot of people. So, we just felt that, when Molly and I were given the company, that this was something that we should formally announce. And also, Ethan is here with us, who is the... and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but, we brought him on as the new editor of Tattoo Time. So I think from however you want us to explain this and talk about this, that's what we're here for.
Okay. Well, let's get into how did you and Molly come into taking over Hardy Marks?
Well, it's a hostile takeover. We said, Ed, listen here. No,
I figured.
Well, as it's become public knowledge, Ed is suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, and, he's getting up there in age. He still has his health, but certain things just have to basically stop. I remember I got a call. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but he called me and told me, like, hey, this is really scary, but I'm starting to get these gaps in my memory. Like, sometimes whole days will be gone, and I want you to hear this firsthand from me. And I tried to be like, well, I think like maybe my initial reaction was a kind of joke about like, oh, you're fine. You sound great. But it kind of was impressed upon me that, okay, this is happening. And then there was a certain day when I remember my email was answered by Francesca, and I always referred to Ed as Oyabun, which is a kind of like boss or, form of respect in Japanese. But I would always say Oyabun Ed, and Francesca emailed back one day, well, Oyabun can't email anymore. And it's gotten to that point. So Molly and I, we kept, we were doing our visits. This was when he was still living at home and going to the studio. So we'd go to Pat's Cafe and we'd see him. And most of the visits, there were some days it was kind of, I think that's the misleading thing about that condition, where some days everything's normal. And then other days not so much. And then one day, we got an email from Francesca that said, like, we're going to be shutting down Hardy Marks, and it occurred to us that you guys would want to take it over. If you're interested, let us know, and we'll talk about it. And, of course, we're like, well, most 100% unequivocally, yes, of course. But it's the kind of thing where I actually liken it to when I got an apprenticeship back in 98 with Horiyoshi 3. It was like one of those things like I would have never believed that would happen. So I didn't have any bandwidth to comprehend or expect that. So we made a meeting time. We met at Ed's studio, and the four of us talked about it, and, we were all really happy about it. And I told Ed, like, I really feel like you've been training me for this for the last 20 years. And so we all kind of and it was just such a spur of the moment thing, I think, for them, where I think that had I known earlier, we would have planned for it. But I think that so many things were happening in their lives. And I think that's just how life goes sometimes, especially for Ed Hardy and Francesca Passalacqua. If you look at their life, they've just been doing so much, accomplishing so much. And I think at this point, certain things are, just need to be either closed down or passed on. And so we were essentially, I think that's the short story of it. If you want to get into like over the last 20 years, the things I feel that he's done to get me ready for this, I could get into that, but that's kind of the short of it.
Well, let's talk numbers. No, I'm just kidding. So when that was bestowed upon you guys in so many ways, how much pressure did you feel? Like, was your first feeling nervousness of taking on the weight of this publishing company that had such a rich history of putting out these super important books? Or did you feel that you were prepared for it because you guys have put out important, amazing books over the years as well?
Not necessarily overwhelmed, but like a great sense of...
I think we're honored and grateful. We would soon become overwhelmed. We're currently overwhelmed.
The overwhelm became like later.
Yeah, at first I think we were so excited and we had that energy, like we want to do this, which we still have, mind you. Like we're so excited. We have so many ideas. We have so many books we want to do, but the reality of how much work it is has kind of sunk in the last few months, especially like the first run of books, as you know, were 4 different reprints. So it was relatively easy to do that. But this next one, like there's there's a lot more work involved. And I just feel like everything right now, and I think a lot of people that work in small business know this, like it just feels like everything takes longer, everything is more expensive, and it's just harder to make things work. But that said, we get to carry on a legacy. We get to work in the field that we love. We get to people are really excited that we're bringing certain books out and that we're bringing new books out. So there's definitely a lot of reward to it, intrinsic and extrinsic. And there's no doubt that this is what we want to do. However, that said, I've gone down to 4 days a week tattooing, just because, and even that, we're kind of finding it hard to find the time, just with other projects as well. But yeah, it's not lost upon us how important this is. Like I said, I think Ed Hardy is the single most important person in the Western world of tattooing. And, we feel that Ed and Francesca, and that's the other thing when we mention Ed Hardy, of course, Ed is the tattooer and whatnot, but Francesca has been with him for over 50 years. So they've been a team for this whole time. And I think that's a lot of what we feel is that we're accepting this as a team and continuing it as a team. And I think that's also doing Francesca an honor as well. So, there's a lot of joy in that. But at the same time, when they signed over 43 copyrights to us, it's obviously we need to keep those going. We need to keep those available to people. Ed was always about education. Ed and Francesca want the books reasonably priced. They want them available. So, there is a certain amount of responsibility. Yeah.
Is it accurate to say that you guys always take on too much? Because it seems that way to me.
Yes.
The answer to that is yes.
Very astute observation.
So whose fault is it? Who's the excitable one, and who's the one that says maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit?
Neither one of us have any self-control.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, we're all gas. And we are, and we'll figure it out later. But I think that's how Ed and Francesca were. That's what they do. They're all gas, and that's why they accomplish so much.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anytime the shiny thing is dangled in front of your face, you got to grab at it without too much worry about what's going to take to get it.
And I think there's also even stuff like, let's say, like you, for example, you've always been supportive of this from the start. When we're like, hey, we'd like to, and that actually happened when they first told us that. I called certain friends. I was like, I'm going to need your support and your help on this. Like, this is not going to be easy. You're in that group. Also, I'd also like to say too, we called our longtime friend John Akauli. Those of you that are aware of our projects know that he photographed all the Tatal show. He did the Bob Roberts book. I've been all over the world with him. We've traveled with him. He's a dear friend of ours. I've worked with him for over 20 years. He's our official graphic designer and also our photographer. And then obviously, not just for Tattoo Time, when the decision came to like, let's resurrect Tattoo Time. We're like, well, we need an editor. But it wasn't just that. Like, I think just with all the books, like as you said, like, we do tend to take on too much, and I think also, especially with something like copy editing, even if you can do it, sometimes you need fresh eyes. So we kind of needed like, okay, who could we pull to the team that has these skills? And so I think at this point, I'd like to introduce Ethan Dodge, and maybe Ethan, you can give us the fun sort of history / resume of how you got to know us and ended up here, I guess.
Well, before you start, I would like to point out, Ethan is one of the worst tattooers who has ever been on this show. So this is very exciting for me. And that is because he's not a tattooer at all. That's what I think is interesting about this. And I think it's actually, personally, I think that's the right call to make, because tattooers can't do everything. And I know a lot of tattooers are critical when outsiders get involved in these like very inside tattoo projects, but we got to be realistic about it. The same way you're talking about having a photographer and a graphic designer who that is their trade, that is what they do. Like, we need to allow people to share their expertise on these projects that we do. So all that to say, Ethan is a very talented writer, and let's talk about what your involvement with Tattoo Time is going to look like going forward from here.
So Taki asked me to do it while he was tattooing me, so I didn't really have a choice. I had to say yes. Just kidding. That's a joke. He really did ask me while tattooing, but I was honestly like floored. It was probably in December of like 2023, I think. So I knew that they had taken over Hardy Marks. I was super excited for them. Super excited to see what it was going to become, and I have a podcast about San Jose tattooing here in San Jose, California, and I'd been posting stuff on Instagram about how cool it is that Hardy Marks is now headquartered in San Jose, that kind of thing. And so I definitely understood the gravity of it. And then when he asked me to be the editor, I just was like I said, absolutely floored. I mean, when you open up all the other previous Tattoo Times, it says editor D.E. Hardy, and it's like those are probably the biggest shoes I've ever had to fill in my entire life, right? So it's intimidating, but it's one of those things that while it's intimidating, I'm excited, and I know I'm going to do a good job because I am qualified to do it. And I don't say that to be cocky or anything. I'm just confident that of our vision going forward and our approach and everything like that.
Yeah. So I guess professionally, you've made a shift. You've doing your podcast and doing writing articles about tattooing. What is it that has captured your interest in such a huge way, I guess, to be putting so much time and energy into tattooing? What is it that's got your curiosities?
Yeah, it's a lot of things, to be honest with you. So I grew up in Utah, and I was raised Mormon, and tattoos were forbidden. But I was always fascinated by them, to the point where even though I was like the most Mormon boy you ever would have met, I was like designing tattoos in my head. They were all shit now compared to like what I know what makes a good tattoo. It was mostly like band logos and stuff like that. And be like, that'd be cool to get this on my back type of thing. And so I've always been fascinated by it. I remember like my uncle who he was raised Mormon but left in adulthood. He had some tattoos, and I just thought they were the coolest things. They were like the stereotypical 90s tribal armband type of stuff, But I thought they were just so cool. And then fast forward to when I was 25, I left the Mormon church, and that's a whole other story that we don't have time to get into here. But all of a sudden tattoos became permissible. They were an okay thing. And I actually did have a rebellious streak when I was 18, and I did get a very small tattoo, even though I was still Mormon. It's on my ankle, and I still have it. Never going to cover that thing up. I know, right?
Anytime something is forbidden, doesn't it always backfire? It makes you want it so much more.
Yes. And I think that's part of what I think that's exactly captures my fascination with it now, is that it was so forbidden my entire life, yet I was still so into it. And now that it's okay, and I've given myself permission to get tattooed, to study tattooing, and I've just gone full in, right? Previously, I got my start in reporting, actually reporting on the Mormon church. At the time, my family and I, we were moving a lot because my wife was going to grad school. Then she got a job in Austin, Texas. Then she got a job in the South Bay, in the South San Francisco Bay. And that's what brought us to San Jose. And we've been there ever since. And when I first got to San Jose, I kind of started in the summer of 2020, I started reporting on some goings on in San Jose because I loved this city. I fell in love with this city very quickly. That same summer, as everyone was locked into their houses, I binged Ink Master because, fascination with tattoos. It's funny because now I can't stand Ink Master. But anyway.
You know too much.
I know, apparently. But anyway. That's actually how I learned about Taki, right? Ink Master, as dumb as it is and as annoying as it
Taki.
is.
I've like curated museum exhibitions. I've written all these books, but oh man,
All for nothing.
Yeah.
Claim to fame.
It's hilarious because now I recognize Ink Master for what it is, right? For just like reality TV, taking advantage of an industry, like, exactly what tattooers are scared of. A lot of like some outsiders coming in and exploiting the industry. And I know there's a lot more nuance to it when it comes to Ink Master, but the point is that that's how I first heard of Taki. And when they said from San Jose, California, Horitaka, I was like, oh shit. Like, and then I started researching him and the shop. And that's when I pitched a story to our local alternative weekly magazine to do a profile on the shop, because it's, as everyone listening here knows, State of Grace is this world-renowned Japanese tattoo shop that also has artists doing a lot of different styles as well, and not a lot of San Joseans knew about it, right? And so I wanted to put a story out there to promoting the work there and the shop and its notoriety within San Jose, and that's how me and Taki started. And from there, I wrote a couple other stories, including one on Pinky when Taki released his book about Pinky Yan. I did an article on Pinky. And anyway, maybe getting a little ahead of myself, but as I was doing the State of Grace article and the Pinky article and several other articles for a couple other magazines here in San Jose, conversations with tattooers are often fascinating, and they just have like the wildest stories. And I was having particularly when I was putting together the Pinky article, I was talking to so many tattoo enthusiasts and tattooists here in San Jose that were just that were telling me so many amazing stories about Pinky and their own careers and stuff like that. And that's when I was like, these need to be recorded. And so that's when I started my podcast, Tattoo 408. And that's kind of when pretty much my entire journalistic attention turned to tattooing.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
And that actually right there is a lot of, I think, why Molly and I wanted to bring Ethan on board, is because, as you all know, like, I think in the tattoo world, everyone knows Pinky Yun. Everyone respects that. Everyone's tattooing his designs. We just had Jimmy Shai here, who actually I think has really taken it upon himself to kind of be like the second coming of Pinky Yun, if you will. And that's a whole nother story in itself. But I think what really caught us, I think as San Jose people, is like Pinky's dear to us. Like that's in the same way that Ed and the Bay Area, Ed in San Francisco, and the world, right? But Pinky and of course the two were friends. But like when I started tattooing, it was like in the wake of Pinky. So I'm seeing all this big work. I was coloring in a lot of it. So just the zeal that he showed, the attention and the caring that he showed, and then also what I saw was he did something that, as you know, a lot of us tattooers cannot do, is kind of walk between all the politics and talk to everybody. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, and do it professionally. And that's, at the end of the day, that's a really, you brought up the whole thing about tattooers being a little weird about outsiders. And there's good reason for that to a certain degree. But I'd like to say this, that so when I was first talking to Ed Hardy, which is like in the late 90s, maybe 98 or 99, and he was always polite. But it was when I published, or was published, because I didn't publish it, but Schiffer published Bushido, Legacies of the Japanese Tattoo. After Ed read that, it really changed everything. I think, like, the best example I give you is he signed my copy of Invisible Man, like, Taki, you and the crew. And he meant it. And from there, he was like, hey, Donald Ricci is going to be in town. Let's go to dinner. I'm going to introduce you to him. I still have hand-typed letters from Donald Ricci, before he passed. But Donald Ricci, as you know, is not a tattooer, but he wrote a book about Japanese tattooing. He, worked with Akira Kurosawa. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, we're going to Hawaii. Paul Maloney's going to fly us out there to speak at a conference with Rebecca Salter, Roger Keyes, two of the foremost woodblock print experts. So again, Ed is surrounding himself not just with the best of the best tattooers, but also people in other art worlds. And I think that's an example that we can all learn from. I think in so many ways we feel like Ed is like the Simpsons of tattooing. Like whatever you whatever you think you're gonna do, he's already like he didn't have a podcast, so you got him there.
I got him.
Okay, but everything
he probably
you think,
would have. If
yeah,
he was still
right. Like
trucking,
everything you think you might do,
Yeah.
he's already done. And even like when in reviewing Tattoo Time, when we were going over like the reprints, which I'll have Ethan explain what that all is, but like, man, like that hot air balloon back piece, that's good today. Like all those pieces in there, you can put them out today and they would still crush. So was it like he was so ahead of his time? Tattoo Time was so important. I remember thinking back then, like if oh, here's an article on cover-ups. Like if I don't have every issue of these, then I won't be able to know about this art. This was even before I was a tattooer, but just thinking like I won't know about it. Like there's no internet to Google or whatever. Or there's no Instagram, no social media. So it was like, I need to know this. I need this. And that's what led to this idea of the Hardy Hits thing. And I don't know, maybe you can explain that?
Yeah. So the Hardy Hits. So when Taki came to me, we were talking about what we were going to do for the first new issue of Tattoo Time. Now, to give listeners perspective, I'm sure the majority of the listeners know this, but the first Tattoo Time came out in 82. The last one came out in 91. And it's kind of funny because Ed, in the first one in 82, was New Tribalism. And he said at the beginning, he's like, we're going to put 2 of these out a year and it's going to be awesome. And it was awesome. But then the next one, Magic Tattoo, or Tattoo Magic, excuse me, didn't come out until the next year. And he's like, just kidding, we're going to do 1 a year. And then the next one didn't come out for another couple years, which was Music and Sea Tattoos, the blue cover, which is actually the one that has the interview with Pinky Yun in it. And in that he said, just kidding, we're going to publish these when we get to them. Right. And so Ed is also a really good example of somebody who had a lot of ambition, but who often took on too much. Right. And then several years after that, Life and Death Tattoos came out, the yellow cover. And then the last one, Art from the Heart, came out in 1991. And I was actually born in 1990, so I was a baby when that thing came out.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, make everyone else on the call feel a little old right now. But I'm 34. Like that's the anyway. So but then in 20
whatever, kid. All right, come on, kid.
That's right. So but in 2012 they did the box reprint. Which if you, for those of you who've seen it or haven't seen it rather, it's in a maroon box and then 2 gray volumes that have all 5 of the Tattoo Times, right? And in it, Ed actually has an introductory essay, which I love and is all throughout this first issue. Excerpts of it are sprinkled throughout this first issue of Tattoo Time. And in that, he said, this is going to be the last time we publish these Tattoo Times, right? And so Taki wanted to uphold Ed's word there and honor his wish, and so but also kind of wanted to get around it a little bit. Right? And so what we decided to do was actually take everything that Ed wrote in the Tattoo Times, in the previous 5 Tattoo Times, and reprint them into 1 volume. And that's actually just over 50% of the text in the 5 Tattoo Times. So Ed was doing a lot of work to bring these. Not only was he managing the formatting and just like the logistics of everything that goes into it, but he was also writing the bulk of the content, right? And so Hardy Hits is the first one that's coming out this fall, either in October or November. We'll have to see. Maybe Taki will probably have a little bit more insight there. But anyway, and what it is it's literally just that. We went in chronological order. We started with New Tribalism, and we took every single article that Ed wrote in New Tribalism. Then we went to Tattoo Magic, and we took every single article there. And we did that for all 5 issues. The only additional content is I did an interview with Francesca, and that interview is in there, and it was an amazing interview, great conversation. I think people are going to really appreciate hearing her perspective of how Tattoo Time and Hardy Marks came about. Taki wrote an introduction, I wrote an introduction, and then last spring, I wrote an article for the San Francisco Chronicle about Ed Hardy's Dragon Scroll that was on display at the time at Grace Cathedral, and that's in the back of this upcoming Tattoo Time. But that's it. It's just over 200 pages, and 190 of those are originally written by Ed.
So from what I remember, those essays that Ed had written in those old tattoo times, a lot of it was he was speaking about very timely things, which I think is super interesting. Things that were important to him, things that he was thinking about at that time. Mm-hmm. It's such a specific snapshot of that time that they were written. As a collection that you've put together now, what kind of value do you think that has maybe for younger tattooers or just current tattooers who maybe haven't seen them before? Do you think that there's still a lot of pertinent stuff that that applies to now?
100%. Journalistically and historically, of course, that has a ton of value, right? Because like you said, you're peering into the mind of Ed Hardy and what was on his mind at that time. But also, like some of these articles, like he has one in New Tribalism where he talks about people that are heavily tattooed and them having to hide their tattoos, right? Or and how they do that. And I mean, that's not the entire article, but that's one aspect of it. And I actually brought that up to Francesca because the whole time I was reading it, I was just laughing because now like Ed can go to a Starbucks and his barista is more tattooed than he is, right? And that contrast is just hilarious to me. But also really, like I said, it has a lot of value in knowing that that this is how it was back in 82 when he first published that article. And this is how far things have come, for better or for worse, right? And not only that, there's some incredible interviews in there. Like I said, the Pinky Yun interview, there was one in New Tribalism but with Paul Rogers that was Paul Rogers, right? Okay, I just doubted myself for whatever reason. Anyway, yeah.
Andrew has that effect on people.
From Spalding and Rogers, right? And that interview with him was fascinating, right? And I absolutely loved it. And so I think Tattoo Time is also a really good way to see how things trended from 82 to 91 when Ed was publishing, right? Because New Tribalism and Art from the Heart are two very different issues, very different publications, and that contrast is really interesting to me as well.
I think the the smart ass answer to your question is like, well, duh, we wouldn't publish it if we didn't think there was a market for it. But I think I mean, oh, by the way, I noticed your books in the background there. Like that's a nice touch. You're the.
It's a little a little Easter egg.
Right. I like that. I'd recognize those color schemes anywhere, right? But no, but I mean, like really, like I think. Also, and again, I don't mean this to be facetious, but like the sales figures also show it. Like when the first batch of things that we put out, Rosie, Lieber, Dragon Tattoo Design, and Ben Corday, those are all classics. And people love them. And I think, we work closely with Wendy Belzell, Andreas Conan. And like Wendy always like from the start was like, the kids are hungry. There kind of went this period where people weren't as interested in tattoo books. And now if you look at it, tattoo publishing is at an all-time high. And when Molly and I, took over, we came up with the slogan, "The First Name in Tattoo Books." And Ed loved it because he's like, that's true. And he was like really proud about that. And, and we kind of joke about, well, if Hardy Marks Publications is the first name in tattoo books, Tattoo Time was the tip of the spear because that's really how he broke through. And I'm telling you, all that stuff is probably more relevant now than ever. When we actually found a stash of the Sailor Jerry American Tattoo Master books. And I know that some people like, there's some issues with some of the content, but really like a lot of people are really just excited to read this perspective. And I think a lot of people, and people can like look at things at whatever lens they want, but the point is we're making it available again. And I think people, I always hear these things where like, people complain, oh, these young kids. And, maybe that's because we're grumpy old men now. But the truth is like, they do want to know. They're thirsty for it. Like everyone wants to know more about this craft that we love so much. And I think one of the things I do think, though, is with social media, and there's just such a barrage of information, and a lot of it's like, I think there needs to be something educated and curated. It's not like this thing like, oh, I just Googled something, so I wrote it up here as a description, and I don't really know anything about it, which is very, and that's fine, whatever, like we're not judging. Like I don't really spend too much time. I know there's, for me, I think our philosophy just as who we are, like not just as publishers, but it's rather like we're not going to like worry about stuff we don't like. We want to promote things we like. If you look at Ed his entire career, Ed just loved it. Like he would get super excited about something and be like, "Oh, like look at this!" And he used to talk about how him and Mike Malone used to sleuth things out. Like they'd go and look at the basement of the Boston Museum, or hey, I got a Polaroid from Horiyoshi 2 Kuronuma, and you would treasure it because you couldn't get that anywhere else. And now it's like maybe like people aren't as excited because you see a million images a day. I mean, I'm sure just amongst your podcasts, you talk to so many people and the industry's changed so much. So we kind of want to dial it back a little bit. Let's like bring back a lot of stuff. And for both of us, I think, actually, I'm sure I can speak for all of us here that, like I said, for me, Ed Hardy's like the greatest Western tattooer ever to live. And one of the reasons too that this current run is the reprint of Ed Hardy Tattoo Flash, the Tattoo Time Hardy Hits, and then the Leo Zuleta book is because they're all books I want Ed to see. I want Ed to hold and know that, like, don't worry, we're going to get around to reprinting Sailor Jerry and all those books. But right now, this is more pressing for me emotionally. And I do want to say, too, we had a really nice lunch with Ed and Leo the other day. And while we don't have the actual sample book yet because it's being printed, we had the dummy book, which showed the cover. And the back cover of Tattoo Time Hardy Hits is a picture of Ed and Francesca. And the first thing he said was like, "Doug, take a picture of this. I want to show Francesca this." And that was like such a special moment. And, like just seeing how happy he was. John and Ethan actually did the layout of the cover. They chose a blue cloth with gold foil. It was amazing. They actually came up with this thing. Tell us about the TT thing you guys did.
Yeah. For what it's worth, the gold was John's idea, and I did not think it was going to turn out well, but it did. So, so trust in John
beautiful.
is what
Graphic
I learned
designer.
there. But anyway, so yeah, what I did was I actually took I just took one of the T's, the first T in the Tattoo Time logo, that has like the kind of little curl that goes into the top line, and I just cropped that and then I mirrored it, and so that it's TT, and then it's got the two curls on either side, and that's now kind of our logo for Tattoo Time, like an icon, if you will.
Oh, I wanted to ask, do you think, like through the 80s, that original run of Tattoo Time, do you think that the majority of people who were reading those were not tattooers? Like that reached the general public more because it would have had to have been, because I feel like tattooing wasn't big enough to support something like that to make it worth it.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, they're talking like, I think Francesca said they were doing print runs of what, 5,000 or something, 10,000?
I can't remember numbers.
Well, and then, like the places that they
yeah.
sold them to were not tattoo necessarily places. Like
so in my interview with Francesca, she talks about going, and Ed has talked about this before in various essays and interviews and stuff, but they went to like a librarian convention, and the librarians were very excited about Tattoo Time because they would get inquiries like wanting to learn about tattoos, people like patrons coming in, and there would be very few tattoo resources, right? And so they were very excited about Tattoo Time. So I know they placed them in a lot of libraries. I know they placed them in a lot of art museums. But I also know that she sold them at a lot of tattoo conventions. In the interview, she talks about that, going to tattoo conventions and selling them and taking subscriptions and people's information there and stuff.
I'm not proud of this, but I think I was in junior high. The town I grew up in had a place called Newsbeat, and I stole a couple issues from them. I should, you know what? And actually, Ethan and I were talking about this because the place, I don't know if it's changed owners. It probably has, I'm sure, because I'm 50 now. But I should take a box of like the new ones and just be like, here, I owe you this. Like here with interest, right?
Exactly. Would you say that this whole endeavor is maybe to absolve yourself of guilt?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's my whole life. Real quick, I wanted to interject this before I forgot. So in the interview that Ethan did with Francesca, like she talks about how like Ed and Leo like laid out that whole thing on their floor and like like they were cutting and pasting and doing all this stuff. And then she said something like, I think Leo might have done the logo. And then it was funny because when we had lunch the other day, like Ed goes, "Who did this logo?" And then Leo's like, you did, Ed. And he's like, did I? And then he's like, and then it's like, and that's the thing, like, for the record, because Leo's like, no, there's originally a different one. Because if you look in the box set, the black issue has a different logo. And then by the next one, and Leo specifically said, like, no, Ed, it was you that made it kind of look like a mantra. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that answers that one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's actually pretty cool from Leo himself.
So Leo said that he did the first one.
I think so, but then the one that's in use is Leo. That's basically Ed's version of it.
So if you look, like, for little additional context here, like if you look at the first one, like Taki was saying, the line that goes across the top of all the letters is very flat. Whereas if you look at all the subsequent ones and the reprints of New Tribalism, the logo has a lot more of these like whips and curls and stuff, and a little more wavy, and that's what we're referring to.
But we're also talking, like, these are two of the most creative people in the tattoo world in tattoo history. Two people that I would say are in the top 5 of impacted Western tattooing the most. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's kind of cool how they vibe off each other. How even Leo named his book The Black Wave, which was his first shop in LA, but you know who actually named that was Ed Hardy, because they were both surfers. So there's so much here, and I know, like, you know, like, I feel like in a small way, the amount of mentoring I've had from Ed, and I'm sure if you talk to people like Freddie Corbin or Eddie Deutsch or any of those people, it's like, you know, like, I know Leo still, like, there's so much, like, he's like, I owe it all to Ed, and I feel a lot of us feel that way, and I think most of our generation feels that even if you didn't know Ed personally, without Ed's publications and his artwork and just everything, you know, and by extension Francesca, because she was there making it all with him. You know, she might have been, like, not in the spotlight of it, but, you know, she worked for all of it. And, like, there was even times when he first opened a studio, she was paying the bills because they had no idea if it was going to work or not, and then it took off. But at the time, like, she was totally, you know, she was 100% in, you know, like Molly.
What do you think fueled his desire to be the person who spread the word about all this stuff? Because those original tattoo times, a lot of it was, I always felt like it was kind of his attempt to, like, legitimize tattooing, or at least to show people who aren't familiar that there is a history and there is all this stuff that if you peel back the layers, there's more to learn from it, which probably wasn't public knowledge at that point, or you couldn't pick up many books to find that. What do you think it was just his interest? His own interest he wanted to share? Do you think he had more bigger ideas about like where tattooing could be pushed if more people knew the history?
Andrew, I feel like you were at lunch with us last week.
Yeah.
Because
I was there.
I knew it, right? You were in the next. Yeah, you had the mustache and right.
Sunglasses on.
Yeah. No, because I swear he kept saying that though. He's like, you know, when I was hanging out Burt Grimm's, he let me, you know, they let me hang out even though I was a kid. But he's like, oh, it's so great how it's seen now, because people used to really look down on it.
How big tattooing has gotten. Mm-hmm. He kept saying that.
Yeah, like over and over. And I remember like Mike Malone said this to me that, you know, back then, if you told someone you tattooed, they'd look at you like, oh, I'm sorry. And I think, like, you know, if you look at Ed's, like, you know, that one issue of Drawings for Tattoos, the blue one. But if you look at his childhood, like, he was into this from when he was a child, like, you know, but I think at the time, it's like, and maybe what you're saying earlier, maybe the forbiddenness and, you know, maybe that made it more alluring. But I do remember reading in one of his memoirs talking about how, you know, the fourth time somebody's thrown up in your front door of your tattoo shop, the romance goes out of that. And then the other side of that too is I think Ed, you know, he's like really a man of the world. Like, you know, this is what I tell people. It's like, Ed didn't go to Japan like a colonist. Ed went there to appreciate stuff, to learn stuff. He went to go study with the masters on their invitation. I mean, he got treated like an apprentice by Horihide, but like he was like genuinely interested in these things. Like, that's why if you look at Tattoo Time, he covers so many different global things. Like, and this is at a time when diversity wasn't even a word. He just was like, Samoan tattooing, that's awesome. Japanese tattooing, that's awesome. I mean, I know that in the interview that Ethan did with Francesca, there's a part where Francesca talks about, like, and one of my friends is like, you know, you got to get some culture. Let's go watch some Japanese movies. So I think there was a growing movement amongst their peers to kind of know more than what was just around them. They wanted to, you know, go east. They wanted to go everywhere. And I think like Ed respectfully was so enamored with all this stuff, and that's why he was able to like really convey it.
Well, and his mom really influenced his love of different cultures and art.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think classically, anyone who studies art or music or anything like that, you spend so much time looking to the past, looking at other cultures, looking at things that happened all over the world to inform what you make or what you focus on or whatever. So it's kind of like that classical path into learning art. It was just tattoo specific, which probably many,
That's very
how
true.
many people at that point had really done that? Probably not too many.
Well, and if I may interject it, there's a podcast that I really love that's not mine, but I'm going to plug it here. It's called Beneath the Skin by Matt Lauder and Thomas Omani. And Matt specifically he's an art historian that has focused on tattooing. And if there is a single like theme or thesis through their podcast, it is that Ed Hardy absolutely changed the world of tattooing, the community, the industry, whatever you want to call it, and that was his intention. One reputable historian definitely argues that that's the case for sure, and I agree with him.
Andrew's totally going to edit that to where you're going to be like, there's this podcast I really like, Books Closed by Andrew Stortz. Like he's totally going to voice over that part.
I do really like
Matt who?
I actually do really enjoy Books Closed. I actually told Andrew this, that when we first talked, is that Andrew, whether you like it or not, you are a journalist. What you're doing with Books Closed,
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Dude, we already got the gig, bro. We're already on here,
what you're doing,
dude.
man.
It's cool, dude. Relax.
You have so many great episodes, and the way that you approach it is it's just great. I love it.
No, you know what's funny, Andrew? I haven't even done his podcast because
he keeps.
I was like, I'm saving myself for Andrew, because I only got so much shine that I could put out there. But
well, you know what's funny, Taki, and I don't know if I've ever told this story on the show, but right before I interviewed you that time, and that was when we met for the first time. The night before I was flying there to meet you, you called me and you said, oh, I just listened. I had like 2 or 3 episodes out at that point. It was brand new. I had no confidence in what I was doing. I had no clue if anyone cared to hear it. And you were like, oh, I just listened to your first episode. Like, do you think people actually are going to like this? And I was like, oh my, what? What is with this guy? I was like, I don't know. Like, we don't have to do this, dude. I don't fucking know. I'm sorry. And you're like, no, I mean, like, we should do, make sure it's interesting. And so the whole flight, I'm just like, make sure it's interesting. Make sure it's interesting. Make sure it's interesting. And I'm just waiting to walk into the shop and you be a fucking monster the whole time, which obviously didn't happen at all. And then I think we had a good time. It went well. People really still like that episode now. But you really turned me on my heels very early on.
I don't
That's
recall
amazing.
any of this. Like I think this is like all a fabrication. No, I do remember though feeling like, because like literally like, and I still think you're the funniest guy in tattooing, which is not like, that's a compliment, right? I remember thinking like, man, this guy makes the funniest videos. Like if I say anything stupid, he's gonna roast me. But then I think I was like a little defensive, so I was like, I probably came off like a total jerk. So I hope I'm not this time, but I mean, I plead like youthful ignorance on that one. But 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 I also like there's also a reason like oh man, like I love the even like the funny videos you do where somehow like that one about dragon tattoo design, somehow you manage to be so funny yet convey all this information like. Anyhow, you're really great at what you do.
That was hilarious.
Yes.
We really like, and that's also why we chose this as a platform to kind of like. I wanted everyone to know that Ethan's working with us. I wanted to let everyone know Tattoo Time is back. I wanted to let us know we're doing Hardy Marks. We have, and there's a lot of stuff on the horizon. Like I said, we've already done 4 reprints this year. 3 more books are coming. As many people know, we were in Nashville photographing Chad Keplinger. There's, like a lot of people have kind of asking, like, what's next? And I think we're going to have this healthy mix of like, reprints of material. A lot of people are asking for Sailor Jerry, New York City Tattoo. These kind of things are going to happen all in due time. Like I said, we have a lot of material to get through, but we also, and I think this is the other thing with Tattoo Time is that we could just sit here and reprint Ed Hardy stuff, forever and be fine. We would be a great publishing house. We'd be doing tattooing a great service. Like you said, I think we've all said that he's affected tattooing the most in the world. He's also, I think I've written this in books before, that he single-handedly introduced the Japanese tattooing to the West, like, like hands down. And that's become one of the most popular styles in the world, in the way that Leo introduced tribal to the West, and I think those are really important things. That said, like with Tattoo Time, we've already got kind of like fun stuff in mind, like we already have prospective titles and themes for a few more issues lined up. I'm not sure how much we want to talk about that, or maybe not at all. I always feel like it's weird to talk about stuff if it's not ready to go yet. But
yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, the idea being that, like, in the same way too, we have certain authors that we're already working with, that I think people are going to be really excited about. But I think the idea is, like, all of us have, like, what's guiding us with Hardy Marks is what would Ed Hardy and Francesca do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it is. Like, we don't want to, like, put out anything that they wouldn't feel comfortable with their name on, like, and it's like, and that's a huge thing for us. That Hardy Marks logo, which I mean,
it's a legacy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To take care of.
Yeah.
So,
and we want to expand on it too. But every time we approach a new artist or come up with a new book idea, we always think, would they like this? What would they do? And that's like our guiding light.
Well, to speak more generally about all this stuff, thinking about all these books, from the reprints to all these new projects, in the context of 2024, in the middle of all this digital media, everything is digital. How do you think books stack up to all this new media for tattooing?
Why are you?
I'm smirking because we've had this exact conversation.
I love books. I still can't draw on an iPad. So I love books. That said, I do understand, like, the convenience of, like, being able to go to a convention with 1,000 images on your iPad, things like that. But I think that there's a resurgence. I think people are liking books again. I think people are collecting them. I think just, and not to be crass, but I think our sales figures would say that it's going to be just fine. And maybe it's a niche market, like, we're not going to be selling as many books as Random House per se. But I don't know. For me, like, my father was a professor. My sister, my brother-in-law, they're both great authors and professors. So it's like, I think I really respect books. It's not the same to me just to, like, post something online. Like, I think a book is important. I mean, it's not as cool as a podcast. Okay. I mean, there's no, but I don't know. For me, there's something sacred about books. And, so I think there's, like, something there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, so my professional background is actually in tech. And so I've worked a decade in the tech industry, which I don't love, but that's okay.
Nerd.
Exactly. But
so I don't know why I feel like I have to haze you into this tattoo world. It's just
it's okay.
It's just this feeling. It's like an intrusive thought I keep having,
amazing.
but I don't mean to.
It's okay. It's okay. No, I feel like my experience in the tech industry has actually taught me to value physical mediums a lot more. Me as a writer, I actually prefer writing pen to paper. I had a writing teacher that she made me do it, and I was like, no, like, this is so dumb. I'm just like, I liked, before then, I liked to close my eyes and just type and just, like, do stream of consciousness journaling like that. And she's like, no, you're going to connect with your writing so much more if you do pen to paper. And I was like, nah, nope, I don't believe you. And sure enough, by the end of that class, she had convinced me. And I still do type a lot of my writing and typing, but I do a lot of my journaling and other stuff pen to paper. And I think there's a lot of value in, like I said, having a physical medium. That said, I think there's room for both in the tattoo world and in the world in general, right? And so we don't know what it's going to look like yet exactly, but we are playing with digital mediums as well.
He meant to say scrapbooking. Ethan's really into scrapbooking.
Yeah. Yep.
but let's also not forget that, like, tattooing is a physical medium.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, Flash is on paper, like, tattoos are on skin. Like, so there is a certain point to where we are working with a physical medium. So, like, I think the book goes along well with that.
Yeah.
But, like, there's always going to be, like I admit to that. I'm, very proudly have a fairly large book collection, especially for Japanese art. But there's times when I just Google something on my phone just because I don't have time to go home and go through all my books to find that one image, and just out of convenience. But at the end of the day, I do prefer the book. But, I think we're all like living in, I mean, even here, like we're not here with you. Like we're doing this via Skype or whatever platform, whatever nerd stuff that Ethan set up, like I'm talking into the box and there you are, like, wait, are you here? I don't know. Are you in my head? Like, but I mean, but those are the kind of things that make things a lot easier. But I think there's like, we definitely want, like, we like the material also. Like we like to hold stuff. I think the example that auction, that the Bray auction showed, like, there's a clear interest in like tattoo collectibles, tattoo culture, and tattoo history. I mean, that catalog alone was really, I actually had to message him. I was like, bro, like this catalog's great. Like it was like it's a book, and I thought that was really nice. And I think that says a lot. I know some people, I heard some grumbling like, oh, they're not tattooers, and I'm like, well, neither is eBay or Amazon for that matter, so like I think like I'd like to see something done scholastically. Like I would like to see tattoo flash in museums. Like I'd like to see actual museums cataloging flash the way they do woodblock prints. I think that day is coming. You know what I mean? And I think absolutely people are working towards that, and I commend them. There's some great friends of ours in LA doing some awesome stuff with the Heritage Project. But for us, like especially us, like here, like I feel like our project is this, like keeping the Hardy stuff going, keeping the books out there. For me, books have always been like the Bibles, that's a bad analogy. That's a really bad analogy, but
it's an important book. Whatever an important book is to you, that's what it is.
There you go.
Yeah. I heard shit about that auction too, because he's local to me. So I know Darren. And, I think it's kind of similar like what we're talking about with Ethan, where it's like people are going to get involved in this tattoo stuff. And Darren is like, that is his world. He does auctions. He's like an archivist. He searches history. He goes into people's attics when, people are finding these treasure troves of their granddad who passed away, and they're calling Darren, and he's like learning all this stuff. Just, like any of these great old tattooers that we have all this knowledge and books and all this great stuff about, somebody had to find it and somebody had to decide to put it together and share it. And that's not a job that any tattooer is necessarily going to be able to do. So sometimes we need to have people who are experts in all this other stuff that are involved with it. Mm-hmm. And, once tattoo stuff gets in like the auction house world, I understand the prices get crazy and it becomes unobtainable for people like us a lot of times. And that is too bad, but it's an antique. And we, it has cultural relevance outside of us who are sitting here doing tattoos every day. And we all want people to have this deep appreciation and knowledge for the work that we do and the work that our friends do, and to get tattooed in a way that's informed and they love it. But of course, that love is going to come with, they want some Huck Spalding's gold tooth on their mantle or whatever, if they got a bunch of dough to spend on stuff like that. And that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. So, that's kind of a tangent, but all that auction stuff, I think it's silly. It's silly to have such a bad reaction to it because, like, tattooing is part of the world, and it's our entire world, but it fits into a lot of people's interests outside of just our own.
Well, I think something that happens a lot is everyone wants ownership over things, over whatever type of culture. I don't care what it is. Everyone wants ownership, and you got to realize like it's human, and like and that's and don't get me wrong. There's times when I'll see something like, oh, that sucks, or that I don't like that.
Of course,
but because I'm only human and I have good taste, so But for the most part, like, but so fucking what? Like, I'm gonna be more concerned about what I'm doing. I'm not gonna and like the thing is too, like I think. We have enough of a positive mindset where it's actually like when we sit down and we start throwing out names for who do we want to invite for tattoo time or who do we want to do this, there's so many. And I think that's something really healthy. Like I think back then it was more like Ed was like spotlighting people because, oh, this guy's awesome, this woman's awesome, that person, you know what I mean? Like, because it was like, oh, wow. And then now it's like there's so many great people to kind of choose from and that you want to highlight that it's almost like there's not enough time, And I think there's only so much time we can do to make books. And that's also part of why we've expanded the team is like, like I don't, despite how long it took him to set up the mics, Ethan is much more tech capable than me, but he's a journalist at heart. Like but in all seriousness, like I was really moved and like impressed with his professionalism, like how he treated Pinky, and actually rest in peace, Scotty Weeks. Like we just, he did an article, this, OG San Jose tattooer that I worked for 3.5 years, best boss I ever had. When I told him like, hey, I'm going to open my own shop, I'm going to open across town, and if you want to fire me right now, I won't complain or squawk or nothing. And he was like, no, man, you can work here until you need to. And he came to my opening party, like solid classic guy, great guy, all class. Ethan did an article about his shop turning 30. Sadly, he was in a car accident a few weeks later and passed. But it's like the kind of care that he put into like that Scotty's article, Pinky's article, our article. I was like, this is what we need for Tattoo Time. We want somebody that doesn't necessarily have to be a tattooer, but he has tattoos, he loves tattoos, and he'll be respectful to the people he's covering.
And he writes well.
Yeah, and he writes well. Yeah, exactly. Skill helps too,
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me that you have that take on it, because you and Molly, as long as I've known you guys, you've always been like facilitators. Through the convention, through books, like you guys do, like you tattoo, you do all that, but you're like putting people together. It's true. Don't be bashful about it, Taki. It's true.
It's 100% true.
And I really respect that about you guys, because you've done a lot for me, so I know firsthand that what it feels like to have people that help facilitate. But I see, the parts moving and all the stuff you do, and I think having you at the helm of the publishing company makes perfect sense to me, as seeing you continuing that facilitation of featuring other artists and putting stuff out there, and not in a selfless way, like there is gain to be had, but there's also the fulfillment you get from it. But I think it's a noble path to take, and I appreciate that you guys are willing to take on all that work.
Well, that's a really kind thing for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very kind.
And also, but like I said, your support from the beginning has always been like, you've been one of those people who've just, and not taken for granted, but counted on. Like we knew you'd have our back on this, because, and at the end of the day, it's fucking Hardy Marks. You know what I mean? Like,
we don't take it
lightly.
lightly.
It wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And first of all, thank you, Taki, for what you said. That was very kind. But I want to stress that I completely understand why people get, like, I want to say cagey, but that sounds a little disrespectful, but maybe that's the right word. When a journalist that they've never met shows up at their shop who's like, hey, I want to do an interview with you, or I want to feature you here. Like, I always get a little bit nervous walking into a shop that I've never walked into before, with the intent of trying to interview somebody eventually, right? Because people are inherently skeptical, and they should be. And so I just want to, I don't blame people for being skeptical of somebody like me, who is not a tattooer, coming in and kind of like making it a huge part of my career. As Taki said, I intentionally and very purposefully approach my work with the utmost respect. And if I was looking to get rich, I definitely want to be writing books. So,
well, I think we've all seen tattoo stuff and read tattoo stuff over the years that was made and put together by people who aren't tattooers, and you can tell instantly the kinds of questions they ask, the things they show, the things they think are just so neat. It's like it's so transparent when something is lame, and I think that could be the skepticism of it, because usually that's how a lame thing can be made. So I think your track record will probably pretty quickly show that you aren't going to be the person to come into a shop and do a lame thing. But on the other hand, too, I've also seen interviews of tattooers by other tattooers who aren't good interviewers, and that can be charming and fun with the right group of people or whatever it may be. But that can also be lame in a different way, because they're not interviewers; they're tattooers, and they're not writers, and they're not thinking about how to weave through telling a story or whatever it may be. So. I see the value big time in having somebody who has put focus into like how something is written to share these stories that are important. And sometimes you do get one chance to put out a story. You're not going to rewrite the same story better because the first one wasn't as cool as it could have been.
Yeah. And I really, that's the benefit of me working with Molly and Taki, is that they are tattooers, and they can tell me like, hey, like if I ask a stupid question, like, don't ask that question.
Well, I think that's the other thing too, though. You're a big enough person that you can take constructive criticism, or you can be like, like we've had these discussions, like, well, if I'm like, I really like this artist, and he'll be specific, like, what about it? What about that person's work? Because he wants to know more and understand like how we view things and what lens. I also want to say too, like, there's a certain thing here about completion. Like, you know, and I'm guilty of this too. Like, you know, for every book that I put out, there's probably 10 that I wanted to do. And there's that one that works out. I'm sure that's the way with podcasts, tattoos, anything. But I mean, you know, he has a track record of getting published in the SF Chronicle, getting published in the Metro. Like, these are things that like any journalist would be proud of that record. So, and that's another thing we look at is like, you know, when we work with somebody, we want someone that's on time, that isn't going to flake with our artists. Like, and not like for the next tattoo time, I'm not going to get into names, but everyone he's talked to has received him very well, which speaks something about how he's approaching them. Because these are like tattooers that will tell you to fuck off if they don't like you. You know what I mean? Like it's like, it doesn't matter if it's Hardy Marks, like you still got to come correct, you know? And I think he's appropriately respectful, but also means business. And I think that's, you know, I think we're excited. We're super pumped.
Yeah, and I think it's too easy to focus on like potential negative reactions or opinions on stuff, and maybe we're even giving it too much weight in this conversation. But it's hard to ignore the negative stuff, of course. But whatever. So, what do you guys think about the fact that there are basically not any tat mags on newsstands anymore? And tattoo magazines like that are obviously way different than what we're talking about you guys making right now. But do you think that the world is at a loss where you can't pick up some trashy-ass tattoo magazine anymore very easily?
Are there any magazines on news racks anymore?
I feel like there's maybe one or two, but barely.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I'll answer my opinion on that in a second. But I actually loaned Ethan, because I was going through my garage, like probably like 20 or 30 copies of, remember International Tattoo Art? Like, remember when they did that run of like Whitehead, Kane, Grime? Like, there was like a run of like 6 or 7 really great issues. I also loaned him a bunch of Tattoo Archive newsletters. But I think social media has kind of taken that chunk out. Like, there's no journalism anymore because everyone's just like reposting the same stories. But I think like it's also, I do think what was it Andreas that did the Never Seen Before? I thought that was a good thing. I think he specifically was like, if you're going to submit to this thing, it has to be something you've never posted. And because at the end of the day, people are like, why would I buy this if I've already seen these things? And I think like that's a thing, like the timeliness of it's interesting because I remember reading an interview, and I think it was with like, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it might have been Aaron Kane, but he was talking about like at Primal Urge, they would like look at the magazine and see how they'd been ripped off from the last issue, like to see how somebody had taken their tattoo and basically redid it. And it's funny because like that stuff like is simultaneous. Like I remember Koji Ichimaru telling me like, oh yeah, I would do a tattoo, post it, and the next day 3 people would send me photos of they trace it and do it themselves and somehow think he'd be happy about that. And I'm not saying, you know what I mean? Like, but it's kind of crazy. Like, I know tattooers that specifically won't go on Instagram because they're afraid of it, like basically influencing their work, like subconsciously even, or they just want to work on their own stuff. Like on the other hand, it's a great way to just see cool stuff. Like sometimes like, wow, like this is like, you know, there's this person doing this really amazing stuff. So it gives people like, and I think this isn't just tattooing; it's just social media in general. It's changed the world. Some good, some bad, just like everything. But I do think the magazine is kind of, you know, become a thing of the past. We're hoping that with Tattoo Time, because it will be a periodical, that it'll be kind of like a book in that sense, where it's, you know, it's a periodical in that it will hopefully come out on a schedule, but it'll be something more like a book that you want to keep on your shelf. Not like I feel like magazines, like even though I kept all my tattoo magazines. I feel like magazines are a little more transitory. Like you grab one at the airport, you read it, you throw it away or recycle it, hopefully. I do think what's funny is I remember when I gave Ethan those magazines to look at, I had Post-its on tattoos that I thought were good. And for the life of me, I'm now like 20 years later, I'm like, why did I like that tattoo or something, you know? So, but Tattoo Time's always held. Like we went over every page of that thing and it's still good. And so there's something to be said for that. And I think that's what we're trying to get.
What's happening to tattoo magazines and that there aren't any on the newsstands and that tattoo news is more internal than it is external. That's not unique to tattooing at all. That's being seen across all, topics, right? In news writing and magazine feature writing and stuff like that. And in fact, it's most people think that I'm doing it backwards, going from tech into journalism. I mean, I've been doing journalism on the side for the past like 8 years, but most people, when they hear that I'm like trying to pivot out of my full-time tech job into doing journalism full-time, they're like, oh, usually people are doing it the other way, leaving journalism, going to tech. And I am a sucker for a really, really great magazine, long-form feature story. But they're just not as frequent as they used to be, and if they are, they're coming from the big publishers, right? And that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about Hardy Marks, is that it is a very small time niche company that is catering to a very specific audience, and that's like, honestly, in today's journalism, like news climate, that's exactly what a journalist wants, right? Like I feel extremely fortunate to have been given this opportunity because of that. And for many other reasons, but
we're big timers, thank you. Actually, no, but he brings up a really good point, and I don't mean this to denigrate, and because like I do appreciate, like, you know, in my career I've been featured by the type of magazines that I'm going to just talk about right now, but a lot of the major magazines were owned by big corporate publishing. The editors weren't tattooed, the photographers weren't tattooed, you know, whereas, you know, like Ethan's got sleeves, John's got like almost a suit, you know, and they're in that life. And I think that's the other thing, is like, and then the people that own the company, like everyone involved loves this. Like, we care about this. It's not just like, oh, let's throw conventions all over. Let's sell cheap jewelry. Let's, you know what I mean? Like it's like,
it's like personal.
Yeah, it's personal. Like, obviously, like, you know, to continue doing this, we want to always make money. That's like the reality of it. And to be quite fair, I'll say it, like, you know, I love giving a tribute to Ed and Francesca. That's a great feeling, you know, and any tattooer that doesn't think that's a good thing is an idiot. Like, you know what I mean? That's like a great part of this, is that we get to like actually kick up to them, you know? So that's, you know, but I think like, so obviously from a business perspective, we want to like make the company profitable so we can do more projects, we can do more things, and also keep the books affordable. Like, we're trying to hit like, you know, like Ed, if you look at his books, like he really tries to keep that $40 to $60 price range, maybe like, you know, a little bit more for certain things. But like the Tattoo Time Hardy Hits is 232 pages hardcover, and it's going to be $60 retail, you know? And it's like,
yeah,
like, you know, our goal price for the new issues of Tattoo Time is going to be $20. And our point is accessibility, because Ed wanted it that way. You know, he wanted the masses to get it. He was an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sets those books apart. And I always felt that way about the old books. And the fact that you're still hitting kind of the same exact price point as the old ones is kind of crazy, knowing how costs of everything must change. So I don't know how you're not just bleeding money, but I'm sure you'll figure that out.
Well, we paid a lot for these ads on this podcast.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up here. Is there anything that you guys want to add at all? I feel like we got a pretty good idea of where your head is at, and it's kind of cool to see this like very early stages of you guys taking all this stuff on and what you're excited about, and bringing on Ethan's a new and excited thing. And yeah, it's just cool to see what you guys got going on. I'm always excited to hear about it.
Well, we appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Molly and I would like to thank you, thank Ethan, thank John, and most of all, thank Ed Hardy and Francesca Pasalacqua for this opportunity.
Thank you, Taki, Molly, and Ethan for being on the show. Check out hardymarks.com for all the info about their available books. That is it for me for a little bit. Thank you all so much for keeping up with Books Closed. I hope you've enjoyed the last batch of episodes. Luckily for you, I can't sit still, and I've already got some new ideas brewing for this show. Just give me some time to make it happen. I'd better get to work. I'll see you next time.